So Vaush, a popular streamer on BreadTube, recently discussed some interesting polls that I think we should have a look at because we can take advantage of. Those polls generally reflect that America is sick of hearing Republicans whine about woke culture. They're sick of it. Good. That is long overdue. Let's have a look at what Vaush had to say.
I've been trying to mix in a little bit more positivity in my streams lately, though, not without reason. I don't want to gas you all up without what I consider a good justification. There's a lot of bad stuff happening right now and a lot of bad signs on the horizon. However, this is something we've talked about before, and this is the most concrete, definite empirical evidence we have of a positive trend that I've talked about. You guys might remember that the Republican Party right now really obsessed with trans people. We've covered this. And the 2022 midterm elections did not go as well for the Republicans as expected. Exit polls after those elections showed that even though trans people are far and away the thing that the GOP talks most about, like overwhelmingly so, it was actually lowest on the list of priorities for Republican voters. Not for voters generally. Obviously, Democrats aren't going for that, mostly. But Republican voters. What I interpreted this as is a positive sign. So I want to rehash my theory here before I get to the conclusion, because I try to pride myself in making good predictions about what'll happen, and I think this is a good one to ride on. I care about this one.
Before he rehashes, I do want to chime in and say, let us make a note of those politicians that were stirring up hate against trans people. Let's make a note of it. Write it down in your big book of notes. In fact, I think we should steal from Warhammer 40K a little bit and start a book of grudges. I just like there were folks who were members of the KKK in the Tennessee Senate back in the day, maybe today, based on how they've been voting lately. But we chose to let that go as America decided we would no longer accept terrorists in positions of power. We chose to ignore those with a past doing that. We should make a note right now of the people committing just atrocious acts against trans folks, the people who are targeting trans folks for political reasons. We should make a note of them and hang it around their neck for the rest of their lives. People like forget even politics. Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham. Those two should have it mentioned to them in every public forum for the rest of time that they were anti-trans bigots. All of their evil. But yes, Tuberville, all the far-right politicians who are ranting and raving about trans folks, one of the things we should do throughout the rest of American history, or at the very least, while we are alive and they are alive, is always slap them with the fact that they did that, unless and until every last one of these of this filth is out of the public eye, permanently retired, done. This filth genuinely needs to be called what it is at all times. All right, now on to Vaush's theory and the poll that is backing up.
So reactionary politics have been around basically forever. You can take it back to the pharaohs, okay? There have always been leaders, parties, periods of history during which people attempt to consolidate political power through xenophobia, through the creation of in-groups and the removal of out-groups, through bigotry, through genocide. This isn't anything new, okay? Now, obviously, the modern two-party dynamic we have in this country, this representation of like liberalism versus conservatism, is a distinctly modern phenomena. It's a post-nation state phenomena. For a long time, Republicans and Democrats, at least since the Southern strategy, since the switch of the parties, there's been kind of like two like kind of competing and kind of collaborating bodies of political thought, right? And one of them is like progressive liberal capitalism, and the other is reactionary conservative capitalism.
You ever wonder why I like Vaush? My God, it's stuff like this. Keep it going, brother.
Which later fermented towards like neoliberalism and neoconservatism, respectively, which are basically the same thing, except the latter hates gay people more. And the basic gist of both of these are okay, the goal of the Democrat and Republican parties are to consolidate as much wealth as possible in the hands of their donors. Their donors are, of course, the wealthy, People like Bernie Sanders, who average donation amount $13 or whatever, they're the exception. The rule, overwhelmingly in politics, is that money that is used to operate the machinery of a political party, that comes from very wealthy people. It comes from corporations. We've had plenty of Supreme Court decisions about how this money is used, how it's distributed. It's a big deal. And a party is probably not going to get very much in the way of monetary support if it turns around and backstabs its donors by implementing socialism. So both parties are pretty pro corporate. Maybe not to the same extent, but they've leaned that way for a long time. And what they sell voters on are social issues. See, the average voter doesn't know anything about economics, and I don't blame them for that because economic stuff is really complicated. Experts get it wrong all the time. But people do have a vested interest in a wide variety of social issues and civic issues that are more local, more immediately understandable. They tie into subjects that people have a more intuitive understanding of. Very few people are sociologists, but everybody has an opinion on sociology, but not the same for economics, not really. The Democrats, since the Southern strategy, have leaned more towards the progressive side of things. What are we going to sell our voters on? Well, we're going to sell them on this form of progressivism, this, that, the other. Republicans, the other side, sell them more on law and order, xenophobia, anti-immigration.
First up, hey, Wicked audience, good to see you. Foxy Dragon, Wicked Foxy Dragon, Mars Falcon, delighted to see you both. Folks, if you're enjoying the stream, please hit like, and if you haven't subscribed, do it. By all means, do it, because I'm shameless about begging for him. Did want to say no notes for what he's saying up here. No notes for Vaush. Things we can take away from this. What he's touching on, very important for making a case to a group that you think might not necessarily agree with you or should agree with you, but doesn't seem to be. Focus on what people see, what people feel. You throw a bunch of numbers at somebody, you're going to be essentially asking them to do the homework to check on you. No one will do that. If you're trying to sway, focus on what people see and feel and build your case off of that. All right, keep it going, my brother.
Right. Things have changed lately. See, historically, I believe the Republican Party has been reactionary to get the votes to be pro-corporate. The end goal was being pro-corporate. But right now, as the Republican Party descends more aggressively into fascism, they are not being reactionary to be pro-corporate. They're being reactionary to be reactionary. The behavior of figures like Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever else, is it pro-corporate? Sure. But I don't think that's the number one priority. I think that as the reactionary sentiment grows more vitriolic, more pronounced, more distilled, I think that we see a clearer set of intentions where the pro-corporate stuff is nice and good, but hasn't the GOP been pretty anti-corporate lately? I mean, maybe not like in a real way, but at least nominally. Ron DeSantis has been openly going after Disney. The GOP for nearly a decade now has been attacking globalism, international trade. Donald Trump tried to start a trade war with China, which American corporations do not want, not even a little bit. Woke corporation this, woke corporation that. The GOP has been pretty willing to criticize corporations who are anti-American lately. Anti-American, of course, meaning not reactionary enough. So what do they actually care about? Well, I mean, Hitler was pro-corporate. Term privatization was coined to describe what Nazi Germany did with regards to the, the privatization of their businesses. But Hitler's main goal was not privatization. That was a means to an end. The end, of course, being, you know, I think the GOP has been getting more and more committed to reactionary politics for the sake of reactionary politics.
Agreed. I do, however, want to point out, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't talk about this, I want to point out the opening that gives us. Remember that chart I show where it's the four parties as I sees them and what motivates them? MAGA and GOP on the Republican side, corporate Dems and progressives on the Democrat side. They have accidentally dipped into an area where we can make a strong case to MAGA folks just by asking questions, where we acknowledge their motivations, I mean their core motivations, as legitimate, and simply point out, look, yeah, we're under fire, but they're pointing you everywhere but where the shooter is not. Let me show you where that fire is coming from. It's right, y'all. And just bear that in mind. We don't have to outpush this. We can judo it, step aside, put a foot out, and let the GOP, let all the energy they've been putting into fighting us instead work for us. But let Vaush keep going.
Now, that is a historically effective strategy for fascists, okay? People, again, don't care that much about economic issues, at least not most of them. They're too tough to understand, and they fall for bait pretty easily. People do care about social issues. So the real question is, how effectively can the GOP promote socially regressive policies as a centerpiece to their political strategy? And I'm delighted to say, my friends, that since the 2022 midterms, and with increasing certainty up to now, I don't think they can. This poll came out, I think, 2 days ago. A majority say Republicans should spend less time talking about wokeness. Now, wokeness is like the catch-all term for progressivism now. It's basically settled, definitionally. And what we see here, and there are some confusing numbers here that I'll talk about, but what we see here broadly is that in essentially every group, there is a net bias towards talk about it less. Even for very conservative Republicans, there is a 16-point net difference in favor of, please God, talk about wokeness less. Even for very conservative Republicans. For non-very conservative Republicans, it's plus 28 in favor of talk about it less. Obviously, for independents, it's even more so, plus 30. For Democrats, it's plus 39. Now, some of these numbers are a bit interesting. They're difficult to parse at first glance. Why do 24% of Democrats?
Good God Almighty. This is going to be super convenient because I get to cover up Vaush. And I'll jump back to the brother in a moment. But look, there's more there than even he is bringing up. Talk about it less, says 16% of the most GOP-leading GOP folks. Not GOP, MAGA-leaning MAGA folks. 16%. Talk about it less, they say. What else does that mean? That means we should talk about it more. Why? Because obviously they've done a poor job of talking about this stuff. So the things they label as woke, and their only argument against them is that they're woke. They clearly are not able to sway people. I bet we are. I bet we are. Obviously, you're going to have to change how you talk about it based on who you're talking to. You're talking to MAGA folks, you're going to have to make the case successfully, and you can. The facts are there for you, no matter who you're talking to, but you're going to have to make the case that these Anti-woke policies negatively affect the rights of MAGA voters. That's just truth. It's truth. Hammer that home. Remember, when they're banning books, they're also banning the Bible by their rules. Remember when they're saying you can't talk about your husband at work if you're a man who's married. If you're a woman who's married, you can't talk about your wife. Well, they're also saying you can't talk about your spouse if you're straight. The rules can be interpreted that way. And all of it is the government establishing authority over our personal lives. That's what all of it is. And they have not, the Republicans have not made the case successfully to their voters that the things they say they'll get by being cruel to these people will actually be of benefit to these people. That's why they don't want them to talk about this as much. They've made the case poorly, and we can make the actual case. So let's drill into that. A weakness has been identified. Take advantage. Back to it, Vaush.
Want Republicans to talk about wokeness more. I bet a lot of that is because some Democrats understand that this is a losing strategy for the GOP. A lot of it is also probably because the average voter, Democrat, Republican, anyone else, is an idiot, and they probably answer these questions by slamming their face against the phone. And the poll taker had to just sort of interpret the slapping they heard on the other hand, or on the other side. I can't really guess. What I'm talking about here is trends, okay? And the trend here is significant. Interestingly, black people and the racial groups are massively outsized in the Republicans should talk about wokeness more. Interesting to me. Black people overwhelmingly vote Democrat, and using the term woke to describe disparagingly progressivism has been done against black people for longer than it's been done against trans people. Remember? The whole, like, this is woke, that is woke, back during the, Black Lives Matter and earlier was mostly like they put black people in my TV show thing. Now it's kind of broadly a progressive thing, but there was definitely more of a, racial inclination at the time, which makes sense because woke was initially AAVE. So, they turned it around and stabbed the community with it. The results here make me really, really, really optimistic because this suggests to me that the Republicans are doing a bad job, even to their own constituency, of legitimizing the extent to which they talk about, right now, trans people. Isn't that great? I mean, the consequence of that, if you extrapolate it down the line, is that they will either wane in prominence or they'll have to change up their messaging. But there's only so many times you can change up the messaging in a way that still preserves the underlying logic. They can stop saying woke and start saying blorp. But people will catch on. People get fatigue on this. I've talked before about the Nazis. You've probably heard that on this channel in the past. But there is an analogy that I like to draw between the Nazis and the Republicans, which is actually favorable to the Nazis in the sense that, in terms of optics and rhetoric, okay?
Boy, he's going to have to do a lot of work on this one, but all right, let's give him a shot.
If you go back and you read or listen to, if you can understand German, Hitler's speeches or stuff that Goebbels said or the Nazis or whatever, you understand their propaganda. And you should try to understand their propaganda because you'll see a lot of parallels. But if you go back and you look, right, a consistent trend is that the demonization of the other is paired with a eulogization of an imagined better world. Now, I want to be clear. The better world the Nazis advertised was a bad one. Not defending it. I'm talking only about how well they were able to sell this hateful vision to the people of Germany. And what they did was they balanced the hatred of those around them, the Jews, the Untermenschen, whatever, with aspirational messaging about the future of their countrymen. The GOP doesn't do that. The GOP talks almost exclusively about hating wokeness. Even the term "Make America Great Again" hasn't seen much use lately. Have you noticed that? They don't. Go watch any Republican pundit. How much do they sit there and wax poetic about the better world they want to build? They don't. They just don't.
All right, he got there. Non-zero chance, though, that I'm going to cruelly title this stream Vaush Loves Hitler. And just see how many angry lefties I can get clicking on it based on it. I probably won't. I don't believe in mistitling things. That is a humorous thought, though. Yeah, he is right. I mean, when it comes to the GOP, what they say they want for the world, it's true. I don't even hear the "Make America Great Again" chimed in quite so much. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that lefties got smart and said, what was great about those times that you're referring to? What times are you referring to, and what was great about them? And then pointing out at every decade that they could be referring to how Republicans or conservatives, depending how far back you go, were the cause of the things people didn't like about those times. And the lefty ideas were what people liked about them. Case in point, I give you the higher tax rate. Hold up. Let's talk about this in the main screen here. See what the wicked audience has to say. Mars Falcon, Ramses II was one of the OG Union busters. This is known. Yeah, didn't he? Didn't Ramses II do like the stereotypical boss thing and do the equivalent of a 1000 whenever BC pizza party for employees that were refusing to work? It's just funny how little things change unless we actively try to change them. Wicked Foxy Dragon says, I have been working on a blog post on this same topic. If you are talking about either Ramses II's union busting or the GOP or the Republicans being sick of talking about woke, let me know. Let me know. We will share the blog post at a minimum in the community tab because I want... One of the goals of this channel is to share great messages from around the internet, useful messages. So let me know. I'll put it in the community tab. Wicked Foxy Dragon says you have to use breaking or something like that for a clickbait title. Oh yeah, absolutely. There was something briefly like on April 1st. I was going to consider doing all clickbait titles. There might be a time in the future where find a way. It gets under my skin. Like that's one of the reasons I have trouble sharing a TYT clip because I'll see a title of theirs and I'll be like, The way they title things these days, though, is very misleading, and I don't want to watch this whole video to see if it is something worth talking about. So usually by the time I watch a TYT clip, I already have gotten educated. Like I have to know what they're talking about to begin with, because then I can do the math and figure out what the clip is about. And by then I already have a source for a Wicked video, so yeah. All right, so what can we do about this? Republicans, sick of hearing about woke stuff. Democrats, we knew they were sick of hearing about woke stuff. Everybody's sick of hearing about woke stuff from the Republican Party. Take advantage of it. Talk about woke stuff, what they consider to be woke stuff, and make it actually woke. They've done a poor job. They decided to have this fight, and then they threw weak punches, knock them out. Throw haymakers. Loosen their teeth up some. They're showing weakness. Take advantage of it. We came here for the belt. It'll be handed out on 2024. We can knock a lot of these folks out before then. Just Double down on it. We don't even have to describe it as woke. Just remember that this is an area where all that talk, they were talking all that, they were popping all that good a minute ago. Then what happened? They got kicked in the chest by this poll. Kick them again. Great. Make this part of your conversation. It's as simple as that. The stuff that they consider to be woke, just make a note of it and talk about what they are asking to be done in broad terms. Do what oh my God. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, there we go. Do what she did. Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued for women's rights quite correctly by just arguing about the rights of Americans. She said, take gender out of it. This is back when she was a lawyer. She would say, take gender out of it, and what are we looking at? We're looking at policies being suggested and being enacted that restrict the rights of Americans to X, Y, Z. 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter. Same thing with gender stuff. In fact, let's take Drag Queen Story Hour and just look at this on its face. Let's say, I always say Drag Queen Story Hour. There was like one place that has that, a drag queen show. These places want to get rid of drag queen shows. Okay, let's talk about practically what that looks like. Literally, let's just say there was a federal ban on drag queen shows. Well, what makes a drag queen show? Somebody of one gender, usually someone who identifies as a man 99% of the time, going up on stage and wearing clothes of the other gender. Well, what constitutes clothes of the other gender? Are pants what men wear? Are you saying we can't have women on stage wearing pants? Is a skirt something that a man doesn't wear? Are you saying that we have to ban all Scottish traditional festivals because a kilt is too skirt-like? You're talking about literally making fashion police for the United States. It just doesn't make sense when you actually talk about the nuts and bolts. You take your feelings out of it entirely. It does not make any sense at all. What about Peter Pan? That is a role, Peter Pan, traditionally played by a lady. Ever since that one movie that came out like a million years ago, like what was it, 50 years ago? Peter Pan's usually played by a gal. What about traditional performances of Shakespeare that are trying to do it in the old way, where literally every part was played by a man? There are still some places that do that just to show you how it would have looked at X place and time. When you start talking about this stuff reasonably, you realize how unreasonable the GOP are being. And by the way, if these people say, all right, forget all those details, at the heart of it, I don't want kids to know drag queens exist. Well, you can just point out real life experiences. Ask yourself, do you want a child to enter the world ignorantly? Let's go on the Wayback Machine. I find it is very useful to talk about personal stories. By the way, share your personal stories. If you want to share a personal story that you feel, and it doesn't have to be a big emotional one. In fact, share a casual story. Share a story with us about last week, and I'll read it on here. Send it to wickednetwork.com/contact. I'll read some anecdotes. I do find that is helpful to let people imagine the real world version of the broad concepts we're talking about. Let's do a personal story. Already did a video on this, one of the first ones I did. It was about Lithuanian basketball camp. As was a weird through line in my childhood, I got put on a team with very athletic kids, so I didn't have to work very hard. and wound up in the national championships. Can't stress enough, we're talking about a pudgy 12-year-old here. We're not talking about a great young athlete. But nonetheless, wound up that way. Because it's the Lithuanian basketball Lithuanian Basketball League, national championships for the United States, for whatever reason, took place in Canada. Well, we went to a hotel in Toronto, and I thought, my God, Canadian women they're on the bigger side, aren't they? The big ladies here. Turns out, that was at the same time as this, international convention of drag show performers. Or perhaps it was just cross-dressers in general. I don't remember the specifics, but it was like an organization that gathered together once a year at this hotel to hang out in their finest clothes. And this was in the elevator. I'm just chatting it up with what I think are quite tall, broad-shouldered Canadian ladies. Got out of the elevator, and my dad's like, not a conversation I thought we would be having this weekend, but all right, here's the thing. Some gentlemen, as a hobby, enjoy, and then it just got explained to me the nuts and bolts of what I was apparently going to be interacting with all weekend. Let me tell you, some of the nicest people I've ever met. Hung out with your diamonds and your fancies. Had brunch with them. Made some friends. Updated because there's the free brunch you get at a hotel, and I was cheap then, cheap now. I'm never gonna pass on a free brunch. Come on. So yeah, we're hanging out. They're updating me on how their convention's going. I'm updating them on how the old Kovas are doing in the championships. It was a great experience. It didn't, when you're a kid, it doesn't generally result in a great awakening of something that was hidden inside you. No, you just meet a different, somebody that does something different, somebody that you've not met before. And the end result is you don't obsess over it. You're not sitting there thinking, what are these mysterious people? You go, oh, yeah. You hear about a drag performer, then when you're 15, you're like, yeah, I remember Fancy. Yeah, she was a good gal. Named Frank the other 364 days a year. Irrelevant. That's the effect it has. Talk about this stuff practically with people. And most importantly, draw people into the real world. If you're going to do it through a personal anecdote, cool. Do it through a personal anecdote. If you're going to do it through just asking them questions about what they're pitching to you, fine. Do it that way. But don't let people have a political debate while remaining in the mindset that their echo chamber, including a left echo chamber, while remaining in the mindset that creates. Because it just, unless the other person's already in that chamber, it's not going to be productive. And even if they are, it's likely to be unproductive anyway. Because at the end of the day, politics have to be about what we all experience. Give it some thought.